If you're a technical founder, should you be the company's CEO? It's one of the hardest questions for hard tech founders, and one that happens early and really shapes both how your career develops and the success of the company. In this episode, I talked to Brent Ridley, who's a former hard tech founder and MIT senior advisor, about how to make this decision and how do you find a solution that's going to be the best for your particular company. Welcome to Hardtech People. This is a podcast about people operations strategy for hard tech startups. I'm Danielle Appelsone, and in each episode, we dive into questions that founders ask around their leadership decisions, team dynamics, processes that can make or break a company. It's mostly just people stuff. And today we're tackling one of the big early questions that hard tech founders face, which is, should I be the CEO? You started the technology when it was, in its early development, but should you also be the one to run the company? That's the question that we're going to tackle. And I'm joined by Brent Ridley, who's a hard tech founder, who's also now a senior advisor for impact and technology translation at MIT's Climate Project, where he's helping to accelerate energy and climate innovations. And today we're going to explore what makes this question, this choice, so complex and how founders can approach it with clarity. Hi, Brent.
Hello. Good to see you, as always.
Amazing. You asked me this question via text, and it just felt too meaty to me not dive into it because it's a question that I get asked all the time, and I thought you would have a unique perspective on it. I'm wondering, what made you ask me this question to begin with?
MIT is so diffuse. There are so many different things going on at MIT. So there are all sorts of different approaches to facilitating the rocket ship of technology out of the university. And you have little pockets, little groups, some focused on helping undergraduates, others helping graduates or postdocs, others helping faculty members in their commercialization journey. There are definitely going to be cases where you have a technical founder that makes the most sense, and you're going to have these other cases where clearly the person that has 25 years of experience in the specific industry meets up with some technical innovator and they hit it off and they're of like mind, and the technical person is the CTO and the other is the CEO. And the question I had was, is that what we should be aiming for? You have a technologist who's a world-class expert at something. So shouldn't they just keep doing that? They've put 10 years into this, maybe more. Shouldn't they continue to do that? Why do we ask these people so often to then become world-class experts in another domain, right? And put on a completely different hat?
Yeah, I like to answer these questions or investigate these questions sometimes from the complete opposite. Like, when do you know that it's an absolute no? When is it definitely this person should not be the CEO? How do you know when that is?
Oh, gosh. Part of it is what you're willing to do, right? And how you imagine your life. And it's certainly in an academic context, there are a bunch of people who kind of at the faculty level, the answer is no, because they're dedicated to something else. They're not going to leave behind their academic position. So that's a relatively easy one. In the absence of that, I think it gets a lot harder, right? So much of a CEO's job is raising money. Is that attractive to you? It's oftentimes not an attractive thing to, I think, a technical founder. I know for me, like, fundraising isn't something that on its own I get really excited about. I don't think you need to have that as like your number one overall driving commitment, of course. But there are potentially some signs there that there is somebody else maybe in your orbit already who would love to do the ugliest parts of the job that you're staring down, and you would love to be the one who gets back into the laboratory.
I think about it in terms of partnership as well, and which partnership is going to be easier for me to find. So I'm either, if I'm a technical founder, I'm either going to need a partner who's going to become the CEO, who's going to be running the business, who's going to be setting the cadence for all the operations and fundraising and things, and really, in some cases being an external facing person sometimes. And then, so that's one kind of partner. Or the other partner is someone who I can, even as a technical person, I can step into the CEO role and I can hand off that technical leadership to someone. And you might even ask yourself, who do I have in my orbit? Do I have that person I think could be my trusted business owning partner? Or do I have that technical leadership partner? Because you're not going to be able to do both. That's the reality of it. And if as much as you can step out of that as soon as possible, you're going to be involved in things, but it's which thing do you want to own at the end of the day, and which partner can you find? And also, which problems do you find interesting? If you are interested in thinking about what is the best financing strategy for this company and how do I attract the best talent, how do I onboard them to my vision, you might be more like a CEO. And if you think that those things are terrible and you don't want to touch them with a 10-foot pole, and you're like, I just want to be at the lab, I really want to be close to the science or the engineering, then you probably should be looking for someone else to be the CEO.
Also, believability. So I think it really depends on the business domain and the business area, but having done some work in textiles, I wrestled with this a little bit. Would or should an investor look at me as a scientist, as somebody that is best suited to run a company that really has at its core ambition the desire to create and produce apparel, which has an artistic element to it? So I wrestled with this question. Even if I was the right person, would it be clear to anybody else that I was the right person? And part of what I came to was there were so many challenging facets for that type of job that I really wouldn't come off as a credible person in that role. And I needed to find somebody else who could do that so that I could participate technically, but not necessarily lead at the overall company level. This is something actually you and I kind of talked about. I don't know if you remember this at the time. In fact, I hope you don't remember, because I hope your brain has more important things to remember. But there was this moment for me where I was trying to figure out if I wanted to, in a sense, relaunch, it's not quite the right word, but kind of reframe the textile company that I was working on, and that would require kind of a deeper devotion to making apparel, which obviously has this artistic face to it. And I just realized that I would need to bring in a key person as a co-founder. I believe you actually pointed this out to me, but it was something I was already kind of circling and thinking about. And that person wouldn't necessarily have to be the CEO, but it made so much more sense as a CEO, because I was really the lone technical person at that point. So I wouldn't have in my orbit somebody to step into that technical role. And it would be so clear to an investor that I had made a wise decision to bring in somebody with excellence in branding or excellence in design, and that those elements were such a key part of the venture that they were things that really couldn't fall to second place. They really needed to be at the lead. So if you're not the right person for that lead role, if there's something of higher purpose or essential kind of character of the entity, of the company that needs to be communicated to the investors and the outside world, maybe somebody else is the right CEO, and you're not the right CEO, even if you feel like you still could be. And I think that's the other part of this, is some of these things are they're not absolute yes, no, right? It is better and worse, and it is maybe just probabilistic. It's probability. Like I'm 60% sure I'm the right person for this, or I'm 70% sure I'm not the right person, but I don't know. And this is the other frustrating part for me as well. Every time I think about a technical team bringing in their first CEO, I don't know the stories where it's gone well. Maybe I know one, but usually it feels like they miss. Mm-hmm. And they have to go through a painful period of like 2 years with the wrong CEO, and then they maybe figure it out in the second go round.
I think that points to the main reason not to bring in a different CEO is the risk.
Yeah.
And for a while, I'd say at least maybe until you're 8 to 10 people, it kind of, it's fine if you have a technical founder who's the CEO, because most of what you're going to be doing is the science or the engineering or whatever it is. And that person can learn enough about how to manage a small group of people that they can hobble along. And they are the person who usually has the most passion for the vision of the company. And that's also what you need for your first fundraising, right. The smaller checks or maybe an angel round is that passion and that conviction, which the founding CEO, maybe they're a technical founding CEO, usually has. I'd say it's really that transition of, okay, we're about to raise a larger round. Am I really equipped to raise this larger round? But by that point in time, maybe you have 6 to 8 people and the culture is a little bit baked, not like baked, because every new person you add is going to change the culture, but at least the founding CEO has, through osmosis at least, established the way they want the company to function, and they've gotten to that first proof of concept, and they weren't bringing on someone who was, quite frankly, too expensive and too high bandwidth, too high octane for that period of time. And so I am kind of in the camp of keep it in your mind if you're a technical founder, but don't make the decision until you feel like you really have to, like you're really struggling with something and you can't get to the next set of milestones.
Yeah. We have these obviously fractional roles out there for startups, like a fractional CFO is now a pretty common thing, right? There's no fractional CEO, which makes sense. But at some level, there are people that function in kind of a supporting role, right? That it's not a fractional CEO, but it is kind of like a fractional CEO coach or just a CEO coach that can help with some of that in those early stages. The other thing that I think haunts me is maybe saying it too strongly, but around this. Is there is a tendency, I think, for the technical founder, and I think you and I know some people who've done a really good job of not doing this, but I think there's a tendency for the technical founder to continue doing what they've done. And this is where if you can bring in not just somebody from the business school who's getting their MBA, but somebody who has 5, 10, 15 years of experience in that specific industry. And sometimes you can hire in this expertise and these connections through an excellent consultant. But that's where I see potentially a really large value add if you can find an early CEO. And maybe it's not a CEO, maybe it's just this leadership partner, but a CEO in principle that really lets you focus again on what you are truly world-class at, and then also lets you leverage what they have done in their career and all of the wealth and breadth of their experience. That's the one thing that I don't think you can quite pull off without having some community connection on your own as a technical founder.
Yeah, totally. I think building that relationship with someone for a long period of time is really essential, especially if eventually maybe Series A or something, you're going to hand over the reins to that person. It's really beneficial for that person to have been at the company for a while. And I have seen in a couple cases where the technical founder is the CEO for a while. They bring on an early business development kind of consultant who helps them with their first pilot projects, helps them with their corporate development strategy, etc. And then becomes a partner for fundraising, like at the Series A, and then that BD person shifts more into a CEO kind of function, and the technical co-founder still remains very involved in the business, but they start stepping into the background primarily because at that point in time, especially once you get to Series B, you're not doing as much development, or you shouldn't be. You should know what your product is and be selling lots of them by that point in time. And so the expertise of that early technical co-founding CEO isn't as relevant because you're not going from 0 to 1. You're going from 1 to 1,000. And often that's an even harder thing for an early executive to learn is is how to go from 1 to 1,000. It's really helpful for you to bring on someone who has done that before, and then they can support you and take over that part of the business function.
In those cases, do you see the original kind of founder that's stepping aside a little bit then ultimately shortly thereafter leaving the company, or they kind of go back to an early R&D role and kind of nurture V2 of the product or V3?
I have seen both. I think in the cases where it's least successful is where the CEO stays and takes over new R&D efforts, primarily because the company is going to be biased towards putting resources towards that V2 R&D thing when they really shouldn't. They really should be focusing on putting all of the resources into V1 or most of the resources into V1. But it's hard to say that to the person who started the company and to the person who was maybe as recently as 6 weeks ago your boss, and
Right.
telling that person, hey, we don't have X resources that you've requested for new R&D is hard. It's not insurmountable, but I think those are the kind of cultural change, like change management issues that kind
Right.
of throw a wrinkle when that CEO is staying on in some sort of full-time development capacity. Yeah.
Presumably that CEO now back in some sort of development role, ex-CEO now back in a development role, is not taking a pay cut to do that. Now, maybe they do, but that would send a type of signal like, hey, it's cool, we would love to have you here in this creative role. This creative role is not as well compensated.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly what happens. And so you'll have even C-level folks that you kind of in some ways have to invent a role for and pay the same, and it's not as good for the business.
Yeah.
It's tough though to replace the CEO of a company. It's going to become their company, their personality, and as much as I'd like to say, your policies and practices can be really strong and your values can be really strong, but ultimately the new CEO will be the one that the company is going to follow in terms of the culture. And sometimes that can be hard for people, especially if the personalities are different. If the new CEO you bring in is perhaps more operationally focused or even outwardly focused or revenue bottom line focused, and the original CEO was like, this was their baby. They birthed this company and they had a lot of heart and you've known them since day one, and giving that up is kind of tough, and not every company actually makes that transition well.
Yeah. Thinking about what's best for not just the company, but for the original founder, right? I also get the sense that there is this kind of expectation that to take the next step in one's career, right? The thing you should do is become the CEO, right? That's somehow more admirable in a way than taking this other route. I don't see it that way rationally, but I think I do experience it that way, like socially or emotionally. And I think that also makes it conflicted or more complicated to make that decision, because I think even if you rationally recognize that, I don't think you know how much it's actually shaping your decision to stay in that kind of CEO role if you're that creative, innovative founder, or to let it go to somebody else. I don't know if you have any sense for how to coach people through that, but that feels like another facet of this, right? Is the social baggage that comes with each of these different roles.
Yeah, well, I'd say even in terms of fundraising, say that you are a founding CEO type. I relate to this. I very much love the 0 to 1. I even love the 1 to 100. But beyond that, it's just not the set of challenges that I'm interested in or the kinds of risks that I'm interested in mitigating against. So if I know that, but I'm going out and fundraising and I'm saying, yes, we're going to be very huge. This is the market. I'm here to take the company the whole way. You can invest in me. I'm the leader. Because so much of those early investment decisions, it's based upon you're investing in the person who's running
Right.
the company. The technology may change, their team may change around them. You're investing in the person. And if that person knows that they're not the Series C or beyond CEO, I personally think that they should say so. Maybe they're not even the Series B CEO, Series B and beyond CEO. They should say something. They should be self-aware. They should inquire into what is it like to be CEO at these different phases, and would I enjoy that? But it also can complicate things because investors are going to want to know that you're there for the long haul. You're not just
Right.
going to dip out when things get hard. And so I think there is not only just the social baggage of like, I want to be seen as progressing, I want to be seen as the CEO, anything else is a step backwards. There's that interpersonal thing that you have to wrestle with, but then also the perception from the outside, which can harm you. People aren't going to invest in you if they don't think that you're in it to win it and that you're going to be
Right.
around.
Right. Really committed. I actually heard an investor, you've probably heard this many times before. I was a little surprised. It was the first time I heard it. It was at Climate Week in San Francisco last year. And they said something like, we don't want to invest unless the whole team is in place and we can see it. So we don't want to invest, actually, if you are saying, hey, after the next round, we're going to hire a CEO. After this period of time, we're going to need this marketing person. We want to see that you've already assembled the core essential team and that you are like, this is the team we're going to the finals with, right? Which was a little surprising to me because I think it's so hard to do that. Maybe impossible at an early stage, especially if you're thinking about, people coming out of a university context. It feels unreasonable to have that sort of expectation placed upon them. But maybe this investor was at a place where they were thinking, we don't want to invest in university startups. High risk, high reward, but not right for us. We're only looking for grizzled veterans of industry who can put together a team and all go into it at the same time.
Yeah. Well, I think we've covered this question, should this technical founder be the CEO, from a couple different angles. One being, what is it that you want if you're that technical founder? What are the types of problems that you're interested in? And then there's the perception from the outside.
Yeah.
And then there's also just the nature of, can you find the partner to be your counterpart?
Right.
And I remember actually taking a walk with one of our earlier investors at Other Machine Company, Chris Anderson, and I asked him, I said, well, what do you think are the essential ingredients for a CEO? And he just laughed at me. He's like, there's every single configuration. If you're the CEO, you need to hire people around you that complement you, period.
Right.
That it doesn't, there's not one way. It's not like, oh, a people-focused CEO is better for this company or a technology-focused CEO is better for this company. It's like, you got to look at the ingredients that make up your personality and line that up with the things that the business needs, identify all the gaps and hire them around you. And
Yeah.
so I took that to heart. And even though knowing that maybe I wasn't going to be a CEO to go from 100 to 1,000, Series B or C kind of hardware CEO, I could bring people onto my team early as COO or CFO who had those kind of complementary skills.
Yeah.
And such that maybe when it came time to when we had progressed and the company was much larger, maybe my role would have been slightly diminished to just the CEO leadership and have a lot of strong people around me. So that is another lens that I take to it, is like, it sort of doesn't matter what your answer is, but you need to supply the necessary ingredients for this company to be successful, regardless of what role they're in and what role you're in.
Yeah, it's doubling down on your strengths and then hiring in around you to compensate for all of your weaknesses and the things you don't want to do, which is probably a weakness as well. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And actually having, worked at a company that necessitated a broad set of skills because there was like a core technical component. Well, there were many actually technical components, but they were in wildly different domains, right? There were some materials, there was some mechanical engineering, but then also textile production and textile design. Like that necessitated hiring in other people. And you could say to yourself, well, I could learn everything, I could do everything, but how many lifetimes do you have? You don't have that many. You have to hire in people who have demonstrated excellence in these areas. So you can hold on to what you are passionate about, what you're great at, but you're going to have to recognize that that's not everything, and that other people are going to have to come in and help you along the way.
Yeah.
Absolutely critical in that regard.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about this hiring? One of the experiences I had around bringing in a CEO, was in the context of very well-established venture capitalists who were helping to bring in this hire. And my impression was they didn't get it either. So I understood, like, yeah, you've got some young people running the company, in their late 20s, kind of fresh out of graduate school sort of situation. But you expect the seasoned investment professionals to maybe see a way through. But they clearly struggled with that as well. So why is this kind of a persistent problem that isn't just sorted out once people have been around the block a few times and seen it? It feels like it's a common challenge and it persists.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's because you have to align essentially three different categories for anybody who's coming in to run a function, or maybe they're running the company. One is values, like the personality of this person, the thing that they think is important, even like how they approach conflict, like all of those types of things. That's like one big category, which is like, how does this person show up in the world and how are they going to interface with this company? That's one axis of alignment. The second axis of alignment is like, what are the actual skills that we need for this job given the next 2 years of milestones? Like let's break it down to the fundamentals here of the actual things that this person is going to do on a day-to-day basis. What skills do they need to be able to employ to do that? That's a whole nother set of alignment that has to happen. And then the third one is expertise / network, I'd say, which is this person's background, the things that they have experienced before in their career, and the things that they have under their belt in terms of hardships that they've gone through, or big deals that they've closed, or things like that. It's like a breadth of experience and also a knowledge of who to call when they really need to, that also has to be aligned, that's specific to the company and what the company is going through. And I think it's just a very hard puzzle. Yeah. When we work with companies trying to break down these roles, we do separate it into these three specific categories, and then we give a ranking, which is like, well, how much alignment do you need on each of these axes? Is it okay to be kind of like a 60% on values and personality, but a 80% on network and previous experience, and a 40 on the skills, or what's the mix?
Yeah.
And as soon as you have three variables, it's just hard to find that right fit, and you're on a timeline. I forgot the fourth axis, actually, which is how on board is the board going to be with this hire? Because there is that, especially when the company has gotten much larger, there's this kind of like politics in some ways. It's like, oh, are we ever going to have confidence in this person? Like maybe the outgoing CEO really believes in this particular hire and they're going to advocate for this hire and they come well recommended, etc. But the board's just not having it. That's going to create tension long term. That could sort of be that introduces a risk, that kind of misalignment between the CEO and the board that they'll have to grow and repair. So I think it's just a complicated problem, and that's why it's not a solved one.
Yeah, I can see that the investors in the cases I'm thinking of on the values alignment piece, right? they aren't spending as much time at the company, right? It's a quarterly
Yeah.
meeting. So they don't have that on lock for sure. And they're probably looking at it more in terms of network and that fourth kind of ineffable one, which is just like, do I respect this person in the boardroom? And so some of it is about specific experience, but I would say that's devalued, and the values one is devalued because the investors, while they have the wisdom from their accumulated investments, they don't have the time in the company really to have a great sense for the day-to-day needs and maybe the beyond just day-to-day, like the upcoming quarter to quarter to quarter domains where there's persistent weakness in the company, and they don't fully appreciate the values perhaps driving day-to-day operations as well. So I could see that as those as major places where there ends up being a disconnect. When you're in your first startup coming out of graduate school or something like this, it's all a blur and it's not clear what these four axes are, how to think about them, where these gaps are, and it's only kind of a year in or 2 years in where you're like, this really isn't working, is it? This person is maybe really nice, maybe really well connected, maybe all of these things, but there's something that makes the fit not optimal for this moment.
Yeah. Well, it's tough if you're if you are a PhD person who is, turned technical founder and CEO, you're building your frame of reference while you're trying to evaluate people against it. And that's just really tough. And it does help to have advisors that you really trust, ones that are not investors, but people who are a perspective that you can get that's just really unvarnished. But even those people, they don't spend enough time in the day-to-day to really know. And so, yeah, it's tough. I mean, I think summary for this podcast is like, it's tough. There's no right answers.
It's called Hardtech for a reason.
Say you do decide that you want to bring on a CEO and you want to be the CTO. Taking your time and really diving in on the interpersonal alignment, it's the thing that hardly anybody does, but it's really fundamentally important. And the times that I have seen it go well, where sometimes even people will join forces with another small company and they'll combine their C-suite teams. The times that it's gone well is when there was a very core alignment on who these people were, what kind of business they wanted to build, and just even some fundamentals of like, how do we communicate? How do we value connection? How do we handle conflict? And are we really in this? Like, we are committed. Like, if 2 out of 3 of us die, is the third one going to keep doing it? Because that's the kind of level of commitment that you want to have from all the people who are on the co-founding team, even ones who maybe weren't the original founders.
Right. Well, that's why you should decide not to be CEO originally. It's because you recognize you don't have that type of commitment.
If you don't have that kind of commitment, if you're like, oh, I'm an assistant professor and I have this technology that I think it would be really cool for it to reach the world, but I'm kind of really also interested in still doing research as a professor. No.
Yeah.
That is not, you're not the CEO of the company. You can be a great CSO, but you need to find a CEO. And also, you should probably find that CEO before you truly launch the business.
Yeah, I think that's right. There's so many demands on roles like that, and here I'm talking about the professor role, but also the CEO role, both. So to be able to do both simultaneously, it's kind of not fair to either position, right? You really need to give yourself space to be professor fully and space to be CEO fully, and there just has to be enough time to properly find that CEO.
Yeah, totally. Well, I would love to wrap up here.
Excellent.
Okay. Brent, thank you so much for sharing your perspective on this extremely tough question that maybe we have more questions now than answers, but it was a worthwhile conversation. And if you are a Hardtech founder listening, remember, whether or not you take the CEO role, the most important thing is building the right leadership team and figuring out which role that you would like to play in that leadership team, and one that's going to give you the most chance of success for the company and also achieving your vision. Okay.
Really great to see you.
Yeah, great to see you too. Thank you for joining us for Hardtech People. If you enjoyed this, share it with other founders that you know, and also subscribe. We're going to have more episodes covering things that are basically all things people operations strategy for Hardtech.